So in this video, I'm going to talk you through all the steps needed to trigger the Swedish Communist Revolution and then win the war against them. This is a great way to go royalist. It gets you a king with a cool eyepatch and is also one of the rarest achievements in HOI4. Now, a lot of guides to this will push you down the communist focus path. I'm going to show you how to do it without that. This means you still get access to all the nice Baltic expansion stuff under the royalist path. Before beginning though, I do want to flag something important. The communist revolution in Sweden will not fire at all if Russia isn't communist. If you're doing this in Iron Man with historical turned off, then you need to be aware of this. I see it catch so many people out. Don't ask me why the event is locked to it, but as you can see on the screen now, it is. So just be aware of that. The other thing to remember when doing this run is that Sweden has a bunch of unique events and decisions. That includes these crisis events. Now these will trigger when Sweden drops beneath 68% stability. But we need to have a stability of 50% along with a communist support of 35% to trigger the revolution. So a key thing we're going to be doing within this run, and decisions I will be making and showing you how to make, are to make sure that your stability is low enough that when you're ready to trigger the revolution, you can very quickly dip from 68% stability to 50% stability, and then you can get back up from 50% stability above 68% stability again really quickly afterwards. So if you're not sure why I'm taking certain stability decisions in certain orders, just trust me. I'm doing it to make sure that you don't accidentally trigger a crisis, which then makes your game much harder to play because it stops you being able to do lots of civilian factories, it damages in you other ways. So for the rest of this video, all I'm going to do is talk you through some of the key things I'm doing and jump forward. You can pause it between things. Here I'm just putting all of my units into a single army. I'm giving them a general. I like Archibald Douglas. Don't ask me why. It's just a cool name. I'm giving them a fieldmarshal. But then I'm also going to change the template for all of these units to cavalry. I'm doing this because when the Civil War kicks off, we're going to want to be able to grab territory quickly. And the quickest way to do that is cavalry. So make them all cavalry, sorts it out, means you're ready to go when you do the rest of these things. Next up, I'm going to worry about fleets. I'm going to move all of our ships over to Gotland because that's eventually the point of territory we're going to hold. We're going to get most of the navy when all of this breaks out, and we're actually going to get an event that gives us the rest of the navy. So I'm just a tidy person. I like having all my stuff there, and I'm just going to set up my standard text to start off with. Text, just treat the way you normally would. They're all you need to do. You get your electronic ones, your industrial ones. Push on them early because civilian factories, yay, everything else, you know the drill. What I am going to do here is show you some good places to build those civilian factories. This central territory that I'm just highlighting here is the stuff that you're going to hold when the Civil War starts. So just as a general principle, it's good to just build your factories in those areas. It means you're going to keep the benefits of them while the Civil War's underway, although obviously we're hoping it won't be lasting for long. So let's set our national focus. We're going to go with Defence Act. Eventually we're going to push down this left-hand side. It gives good static communism boosts. But first we want the radio one that you can get after urbanisation. That gives you a ticking communism boost. So first we're going to go Defence Act. We're selecting that. And then we're also going to look at some of our first decisions we can make here to reduce our stability. I want you to go to decisions. I want you to commandeer civilian trains. We're going to do that a lot over the course of this game, just to bring stability down in a targeted way and get some free trains, which is nice. The other thing I want to stress at this point is do not spend any of your political power at all. You're going to need all of it when this communism revolution starts, or for key things and decisions we're going to do during this run and video. So don't be tempted to spend any of it. Keep it, hold on to it, you're going to need it. I'm pausing here just so you can see my unit distribution. Ignore the 2 cavalry in the furthest north. They're going to walk down south in a second. They're going to end up on the same square as that single cavalry unit, which is 1 province north of Sundval on the coast. By putting your units here, you're having a good chance that when the Civil War starts, they'll be on the border or near the border with the enemy and can move into their territory quickly. Don't worry too much if you get it slightly wrong. You'll just be pinged back to Stockholm. You can railway your units out again to the borders, but it just helps if you've got them vaguely in the right place, and this is a good distribution to have a good chance of doing that. So we're approaching our next milestone here, which is our next focus, and we're also going to get an event, and there we go. The focus is the Defence Act. We're going to change that in a second. First things first, though, you want to have a look at this event. It's to do with the government rearmament. What you want to select is clearly the opposition on the right, because that gives you a research boost, but it also gives you a stability hit. And remember, we're trying to keep our stability to a certain level here. So you want to select clearly the opposition party on the right, and that's going to set you up with a new Prime Minister, and he will do you for the foreseeable future. It'll change in a second, but we'll go in and do our national focus first, and we go with urbanisation. So we're set up, as you can see, because we're aiming for radio next, and we've got our new Prime Minister as well. On to the next focus, really. A brief pause for Kitty here. This is Cecilia, the chaotic tortie. She disrupts lots of my streams, and I did this live on stream. So just wanted to give you a bit of a scritch break. Congratulations, you're doing well so far. Don't panic. And if you like watching grand strategy streamers, then obviously you can find my details in YouTube description below. But yeah, or scritches. Let's have some nice scritches, and then we'll get back to this. Okay, scritches are done, so now let's pick our next focus. We've completed urbanisation, so as discussed, the next one for us to pick is the radio one. That's going to be really important, and we'll have a few things to do once that focus hits. But just before we get there, I do want to talk about something that's easy to forget. We've got this dockyard here now. Put that onto convoys. You're going to be moving your capital onto an island. If you're not building convoys, then you're not going to be able to bring your resources off of the mainland to your capital, because your capital is going to be in Visby. It's a really, really easy thing to forget. Don't forget it. Put some convoys building now. Otherwise, you're just going to really struggle later in the game to try and catch up, because suddenly you'll find that all of your construction's not working because you haven't got any resources, because you haven't got any convoys. Just a quick one here. You'll get these Swedish election events in June in 1936. You just want the last option. Clearly BAG will lead us into the future. That will set you up to continue on with the path you want to go on. So our radio focus is done. That means it's time to pick a new one. We're going to go with hygienic housing. Remember, there's a bunch of stuff on this path that's going to boost our communism. It's also good bonuses, so it's fine. But that's why we're taking these ones next, because we want to go down this path. As you can see, communism boosts, and the quicker we get those communism boosts, the bigger they are, because they do scale based on the level of communism we have already. The next thing we want to do is now spend some of the PP points so we can start ticking our communism up more. If you click into here, you're going to see we now have a bunch of Swedish politics events. You want to align with the socialists. And this is one of the reasons we were saving our PP, because we do need to spend it on stuff like this. We're also going to get ourselves an advisor. We're going to go for, and I'm going to be terrible at pronouncing her name, but Ebba here. Ebba is the advisor we're going to want to get. She's a suffragette. She's going to give us some decisions that we can unlock. But she's also going to give us a massive discount on hiring more advisors. That's going to be really useful when the Civil War actually kicks off, because it means we're going to be able to pick up some advisors who'll increase stability and do some other useful things. But they'll do it cheaper than we would otherwise. So it's a bit of PP optimization, which is always good. And then finally go in here, and it's time to commandeer some civilian trains again. That is useful. Again, brings our stability down. You should now be hovering about 71%. So we're still above our 68 that we're worried about. So a couple of quickfire focuses here. Hygienic housing's done. So we go in. We're going to carry on down that left-hand side that we were talking about. So poverty reduction next. That's critical for us. it gives us a communism boost, which is really, really useful. Again, we're really pushing on that at the moment. Then we're going to jump forward. Poverty reduction is completed. So next up, theoretically, there's two different ones we could pick. We're actually going to go with affordable housing because state paid vacation is good, but it doesn't actually initially boost our communism. So it's better to get affordable housing first because affordable housing will boost it. Pick that one up. We'll get state paid vacation next time. And that's affordable housing done, so let's dive in. State paid vacation next. We can select that. Perfect. We now go in. You'll see we're hovering at 73% stability. That's good. It means we can take our next decision because this comes from the political advisor that we unlocked earlier, which is really nice because we dive in here. If you scroll right down, you'll find under Eber's entry that we can reduce the barriers of political entry for women. This brings a stability hit, which is exactly the amount we need to take that's going to leave us hovering on that magical number that we're after, which is 68%. We're not going to get any problems, but we're keeping our stability exactly where it needs to be. Next up, more focuses. State paid vacation is done. That's perfect. So we'll go in and just select our new focus, which will be accept the Salzgibaden agreement. We'll be going with Stadbarn next. Jumping forward now, and the agreement's almost done. There we go, that's fired. Let's click on that, and then we'll go in and select our new one, which is Stadsbarn. But as we get there, just take a look at the communism levels. You can see it's climbing really nicely now. Remember, we're aiming for 35%. It's ticking up thanks to the radio changes that we put in, as well as the various things we've been picking. We're mostly out of the communism boost statics now, so it's all down to the ticking score. But let's go in, let's set Stadsbarn. Notice we don't need to do this, and that's what I'm really emphasizing here, is we don't need to do the communism one. We can just stick to the stuff that's actually useful thanks to that ticking score. So let's take Stadsbarn. In a bit, we'll go for Royal Institute of Technology, get our new slot. But perfect, on we go. And there we go, that focus is done. So we can dive in and get our extra research slot now by selecting the Royal Institute of Technology. Communism is still ticking up, which is good. Now is the time to start moving your units if you haven't moved them already. We've got a few more focuses to do before the Civil War starts, but you don't want to get caught out. That's our extra research slot unlocked. Next national focus, you want to get government weapon contracts. You do get to choose what you do after this. You're going to get to do 2 more 35 days before you go over to the right side there and do the final one that's going to trigger our civil war effectively. But right now, do make sure you get government weapons contracts. You don't want to mistime this. After this, you can pick 2 at random. You'll see what I pick in a second, but don't feel like you have to pick the same. I just like stuff that boosts my industry. And there we go, government weapon contracts is done. Note that our communism is now at 30%. This is good, it's still ticking up, which is what we want it to do. So we'll select another national focus. You can see our stability is on 69%, by the way, which is nice. It's just above the level we want it to be. We'll be able to tank that shortly, and we'll tank it when we need to by taking this focus that builds dockyards and tanks stability. But in the meantime, you can do another 2 35-day focuses before we need to do that. Personally, I like to take one of the military factory ones now. The whole of this top row is good. Obviously, the Landswerk decision that you take is going to depend on which route you want to do with Germany. But this one over here is the one I like, so we'll take that. Next focus is up. Again, communism now at 31%. It's actually creeping a bit higher than that. It's all in decimals at the moment. I like to take ball bearings next. This is a really nice one. Manpower and stability are always your problem at Sweden. This will give you a bunch of decisions that you can take later on. Don't take any yet. Remember, we're focused on retaining our PP. But this will give you a bunch of decisions that will allow you to boost stability and get a bit of manpower by selling things to foreign powers. And this is it. We're now going to pick the national focus that tanks our stability by 16%. This is the thing I was saying about diving just down to being below our danger points at the exact moment we need it. By the time this focus finishes, we will be mid-days away from civil war. So make sure you're moving your units if you haven't already, because within days of selecting this and this eventually being activated, the civil war will start. Our communism will be at 35%. We'll just need to dip our stability a tiny bit more, and then it'll all break out. So get ready for civil war. And this is it. Focus complete. That's tanked our stability down to about 52%. We're going to drop that even further in a second. But what you can see here is public unrest is building. That's part of the specific Swedish events I was talking about that fire when you have low stability. It's fine. We're going to be back up in time. You can see communism is now at 34%, 34.5% in fact. That means we can choose a focus that restores some stability now, because by the time that focus is completed, we will have hit 35% and the civil war will have started. So what I actually like to do now is dive back over to the other side of this tree, and we're going to select work programs for the unemployed. It's going to give us an immediate stability boost, and it's also going to give us some civilian factories. So be ready. Civil war is going to break out before this focus finishes. And here we go. This is it. You can see communism is about to tick over 35, which, as you can see, we are still working on our focus. So that's perfect. It'll mean that that will trigger in a bit. Let's get rid of that dialog box. This now means we can take our final action, which is to commandeer civilian trains again, which is finally going to push our stability under 50%. We have now activated the timer for the civil war. The mean time to act means it should fire before the end of our next focus. So let's just pick a new weapon bonus here. I like to go for this research. Once you unlock that 50% bonus, it's really nice. But the next time we will be back is when the Civil War event fires. And there we go, the Swedish Civil War has kicked off. As you can see, we're still working on our national focus, so that's going to time out fine. And here you can see the borders as they've landed. We've got most of our units in the right place. We had one unit jump back to Stockholm. We'll railway them to somewhere more useful. You can see in the north here is the capital, and we've got some units up there. And you can see down in the south, we've got some units ready to push into the south. I'll talk you through the approach to that war in a minute, but before we do that, there are some decisions and things we want to set up. This is where us getting that cheap advisor boost earlier really comes in handy, because now we're going to finally spend all of that PP we've quietly been building up. We're going to get Raoul Wallenberg here as a person who boosts stability. Fascinating real life figure, by the way. Read up on him. Incredible guy. Eventually killed by the Soviets. But he also gives us some really nice spy bonuses, which are actually quite useful to Sweden. Particularly if you're going to join a faction, you can become spy leader thingy. The next one we're going to get is we're going to get Alva here. Alva gives us a weekly manpower boost. She does boost fascism, but that's fine because we're about to ban fascism shortly anyway. And actually, when you look at the bonuses she gives you in terms of population, it's really nice as well. Then finally, we're actually going to increase our level of population use. We're going to go up to limited conscription, which is very handy. Again, note the discount applies here as well. And all that's meant that it's saved us enough PP that we can now do what we really need to do and not forget to do, which is to align the radio back to the non-aligned party. If you don't have enough PP to do this and forget to do it, it can cause you stability problems quite quickly because it takes 128 days to activate. You can see now we've still got a bit of PP left. We'll spend more of that now. You can spend that now on whatever you want to spend it to over time. But we're now configured and ready in political terms for the Civil War. I'll talk you through how we'll fight that with examples in a second. But the key thing really to focus on is you're going to be wanting to aim for the victory points, so the big named points on the map. And you're going to use your units to race for these. But also you want to leave some uncovered for reasons that I'll talk about in a bit. The enemy is going to be slightly random in where it spawns. Sometimes it spawns heavily in the north, sometimes in the south, but it also you just have to adapt to that. But the key thing to remember is what you're trying to do here is move your units around things and grab victory points. You're not worried about fighting. But we'll cover more of that in a second. So let's talk about how you're actually going to fight this war. Now, firstly, take a save copy at this point if you are the kind of person who does so. Secondly, make a note here of what I'm hovering over. You want to make it so that you're generally keeping people or the enemy at 29% of surrender. So that's the point at which they're going to surrender eventually. It's not 20, it starts at 20, it will rise to 29. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm moving my units around, as I mentioned earlier, Kalmar and Borgholm, because they're actually quite good victory points to loop back and grab. Because what you're going to want to try and do is, in a short while, another event is going to fire. This event, when you click the right option on it, is going to start the royal return, and when it does, it's going to spawn a lot of units and for the rebels, because the idea is it forces them off the island. So you want to be in a position where you are exactly on the verge of winning the war when that decision is clicked. So what I'm doing here, you can see, is I'm just rushing my units down and grabbing the victory points and getting to a position where I'm occupying as much as possible. Up here in the north, we'll go for Ostersund, and then we'll drive up into this territory up here. And remember, the goal is not to fight the opposition. We might fight them occasionally, but we're only fighting them when we can pin them with one unit, and it gives a different unit an opportunity to race past them and grab a victory point. So there is a bit of micro to this, and it's why I do recommend taking a save if you've never done this before. This strategy applies to all civil wars, by the way. You know, push for these points up north, block by using other units. This is why cavalry is really useful, because you don't really need to win the fight with the other units. All you're trying to do is hold them in place long enough that a different unit can move around. Don't be afraid to use railways to reposition your units if you want to get somewhere rapidly. Absolutely valid and a good way of doing it. So let's have a look down south. You can see movements here. Göteborg, Gothenburg, you can grab pretty quickly. If you find that the enemy are big and strong in the south, focus on the north. If you find they're big and strong in the north, focus on the south. But just keep a very, very careful eye. Oh, look, we've got some units down south here, so they're probably big down south on this version of this Civil War. A little pop-up there. You can see I did record the footage for this as we were streaming. So you can see here I'm using control click to set routes for units. We've got someone there who's bumped into someone. Now this is a good example of the decision in action. I've got other units around, so I'm going to let that unit pin him, and then I'm going to use the other units to move around. So it's very, very micro. You'll probably want to slow the game down. I'm doing this on speed 3 because I'm used to doing this, but don't be afraid to run it slower if you've never done something like this before. But I wanted to describe this in detail because a lot of the time with streamers or YouTubers like me, we'll talk about like, oh yeah, use the Civil War tactics, the standard Civil War tactics, and we don't actually really explain what they are. These are those tactics. No time pushing my horses up to grab points. I'm trying to keep them moving into different squares, because that way if one of them encounters someone in a square, it's not 2 units locked in, it's 1 unit locked in. So you can see we're moving around here. And throughout this war, I will keep a very careful eye on where we are in war score terms. One thing I've learned is it's good to carpet this bit in the middle. Just send one of your horses round to grab all of these territories. They might not have victory points in them, but they do all add up. So it is worth doing. I've also told my navy to actually intervene in the Baltic. They're patrolling over there. That's why it showed up green at the beginning of this section. You can see here though lots of units happening around down south. So again, what I might actually do is pull some horses back, because we have got a lot in the north, and if we know all their units are in the south, let's railway these guys down here, and then they can start moving around while the others are pinning. So we'll probably have free reign up here. Grab loads of victory points up here. Just be very, very careful not to go over or go under that 29%. And I'll just do this sort of off stream, off video for you, and then I'll pop back when we get to the point with the decisions so you can see how it all works out. So here we go. I paused my units because we were getting dangerously close to hitting that point, and you can see here we're at 33%, and there's the decision that we wanted, the Gotland proposal. So we're going to want to click an excellent proposal on this, because what this is going to cause happen is the navy is going to evacuate the king and take him to Gotland. It's going to move the capital to Visby, and a bunch of other stuff's going to happen. We do not want to click this though until we are literally past the point where the enemy is going to surrender. So we don't want to move off of this yet. We can move it to the side, we can minimize it. It's going to hang around for about 14 days. You're on a 14-day timer at this point. So if we look up here, I can still charge some victory points. Again, cavalry now really useful because they move faster. So we're going to absolutely blitz these victory points and get ourselves over the total. This is why you can see why carpet sieging is the real benefit here. You can just move around everyone. So we're just going to send everyone around. I'm then going to pop open. I mean, we might minimize this actually. If you're worried about not knowing when it's going to expire, minimize it, because actually once you minimize it, just finish setting up my units, it'll be. But you can see here, we're then going to keep this open 33% at the moment. We need to be 28% or less to force them to surrender. So I'm just going to keep clicking there. If you minimize this, if you're worried about timing, it will pop up here, and you can now see we've got 12 days left. So you can then just paranoid wise keep checking that. But here you go, it's all there for you. Watch for it. We're now just going to rush and grab those last points, and the moment this slides under 28%, we're going to pause. And this is the bit you just need to get it right, because you don't want it to game to tick. After you've got this, you need to click the decision first. The decision is instant. 31, getting close. We should get it with the next point we see is 29. That unit, as soon as it marches into there, is going to do it for us. Here we go. The tension. Go on, little horsey. You can do it. And there we go. Instant pause. I've hit spacebar to instantly pause. We're at 26%. So the enemy is going to surrender any second now. So we go over here. We now click an excellent proposal. And note, we now have a colour change. We also have a new ruler. Hover over this to see his skills. These skills are actually picked from a random list. So if you get some bad ones, you can just actually cheese it and reload it and it will do it again. But there you go, Kingdom of Sweden. We now have full support for our unaligned, which is now why we can be a bit lazy and ban fascism when we want to. It doesn't matter, we've got a fascist advisor. And the moment I unpause here, this is going to surrender. But you can see they did spawn more units. Those units are much tougher than our units because they're meant to force us off the mainland. So that's why it's critical you do it this way and grab the victory points first. And there you go, I unpause. We get the King of Sweden wounded in the evacuation attempt. What a complicated mess. Lots of nice text there. You can read along with my cursor if you want. And the moment we click this, the civil war should end because they are still over the surrender limit. Let's just double check. Yep, they are indeed over the surrender limit. And there we go, the Treaty of Umeå. And voila, you are now the Kingdom of Sweden. You have not locked out any of your other options. This is the important thing. And you'll notice that our stability is now already back up to 74% because of Raoul, because of other things we've done. That's made sure that we didn't dip too low in stability, and now we don't have to worry about any of the other Swedish problems. And now you can carry on with your game. You can see here all of the unaligned stuff is still available. Theoretically, you could still go down the other route, but you'd be an idiot for doing it. But yeah, you can go the old enemy stirs, and then you can get all the nice events that eventually lead to you taking over whole chunks of the Baltics, should you wish. So I hope that's been useful. That's how to do this as a run. You can now play as you want to play. I tend to focus a bit more on civilian factories for a bit, and then flip to doing a combination of military and get some dockyards out. In the background, I've already been getting Type 7 U-boats off the Germans and building them because they're a good way of controlling the Baltic. But yeah, I hope this has been useful. Don't forget to follow or subscribe and watch more videos and watch my streams. Thanks for watching.